Okay, so this is our second modeling practice, and we're going to move through these very quickly. Now, I did realize that I've used the word premise with y'all, but I haven't made sure that you understand what that means, what premise means. And so a premise is an idea or a theory that you start with in order to draw a conclusion. It can be evidence, it can be a theory, it can be any of those things you use, and it might not be just one thing. It may be 4 or 5 different premises that come together to create a conclusion. And that's what we've been talking about when we talk about logical fallacies, taking information, using that information to form a conclusion out of it, to use that information. So the word premise is what we're starting with in logic. All right, so I gave you that term. And conclusion, you should already know this from science, and that's a word we use more. So the logical result of the relationship between premises. So you have multiple premises, if it's cause and effect, if it's whatever it is, you have the premises that then you draw the conclusions from. All right, so here's our first example. Hey, teach, you may want class to start at 8:30, but in my world, class doesn't start until 9. Which of these is it? Non sequitur, false dichotomy, relativist fallacy, or argumentum ad ignorantum? What is a non sequitur? Remember I said this was related to the word sequence, going in order. What comes before and then what goes after follows it. False dichotomy is what? False dichotomy, think the word dilemma, which is close to dichotomy. A dilemma is usually a situation where you have 2 bad options, right? And you got to choose the least bad option. You have a dilemma. Dichotomy is 2 choices or two options. False dichotomy is when you portray an argument as if it only has 2 possible outcomes. Sometimes it's true, then it's not false dichotomy, then it's a true dichotomy. But a false dichotomy is when an arguer portrays something as having a only 2 options when in fact it has more than that. What is relativist fallacy? Yeah, when it applies to others but not yourself. Relativism has to do, if you get into psychology or into philosophy, relativism has to do with right and wrong, and how some people say, well, it's not wrong for me to do it, but other people shouldn't do it. So relativist fallacy, it applies to others but not me. Arguum ad ignorantum is arguing, since there's no evidence otherwise, this must be true, just because there's no evidence that it's false. So yes, you're right. Relativist fallacy is the correct answer. Here's the next example. Cats just sit there and stare at you. They are evil. Well, you may think cats are evil, but is them staring at you proof that they're evil?
Yep. Yeah.
No!
Yes, it is. They do stuff on purpose.
No. Okay, you're adding evidence beyond what's on our slide. See? That's something we tend to do, is sometimes we fill in blanks. When it comes to these examples, you can only use what you are given, the premise you're given. Y'all are adding premises. I've given you one premise. Cats just sit there and stare at you. Non sequitur. Yes. Just because they're staring at you doesn't mean they're evil. If it's me, it may be that the cat is looking at me going, I've never seen something look so ugly. See, that's not evil. It's just an observation the cat's making. Non sequitur. Does not follow. Moving on. You know that scientists can't prove that UFOs do not visit the Earth, so it makes sense to believe in them. Why is it not false dichotomy? There's 2 elements, right? But the first element is a premise. Then it's saying, well, you have to believe in them because scientists can't prove what? That they actually don't visit the Earth. Argumentum ad ignorantum. Yes. One of the keys with argumentum ad ignorantum, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times you'll have them wanting you to prove a negative. The scientists can't prove that they aren't visiting the Earth. It's very, very difficult. In a lot of cases, it's impossible, but it's very difficult to prove a negative. Moving on. Two politicians were engaging in a public debate about trickle-down economics. Politician A states that this system doesn't work. The other politician retorts, "You only went to Lamar University. What can you know about the economy?" Subtle ad hominem. And I'm personally offended as a graduate of Lamar University.
Wouldn't it just not be subtle? It's like plain out subtle and subtle.
But you're not name calling. That's why I said subtle rather than... It's obvious that they're cutting down your credentials because you lack, or because of the experience you have or have not had. It's a little more subtle, and a lot of people don't differentiate between obvious and subtle. They just say ad hominem, but I found if I split it up a little bit, students always recognize the obvious name calling. They don't always recognize when people are being cut down as people's opinions are being cut down through an attack of the character of that person or their qualifications. So that's why I delineate subtle and obvious. Moving on. Either you support this law, which will give the police more power, or you must be a criminal.
False dichotomy.
False dichotomy.
I don't believe that at all.
Okay? It's a either-or situation. Either you're for us, or you're against us. It implies one extreme or the other. And oftentimes, there might be lots of reasons that people object to a law. Laws can be written in very complex ways and do multiple things. So sometimes people might oppose the law, not in general, but they oppose it because of some specific element being proposed of the law. Piloting a sailboat shouldn't be that hard. You're just turning the sails into the wind.
Dunning-Kruger.
Definitely a Dunning-Kruger. Why? Yeah, that there's a lot of skill, right? And how do you turn the sails into the wind? You know, how do you work the rigging? Well, there's rigging and all of that, and you have to know what you're doing in order to do that. And most of us don't have that knowledge. But as we learned a little more about it, we'd recognize it's a little more complex than just turning sails into the wind.